Hi there, it's Suzy Walker here from Psychologies magazine. I am delighted to introduce the interview with the wonderful Glennon Doyle, author of Untamed. She's a best-selling author of Love Warrior and Carry On Warrior that were all about marriage, addiction, overcoming the worst obstacles to live a life that you truly want. But Untamed is in a different category. It's about living a life that's all about authenticity, truly letting go of people pleasing and finding the path that makes more sense to you. Glennon was charming, interesting, and is inspiring not just me, but superstars. Adele has recently been in the press saying that this book is a brilliant book to inspire you to change your life. I hope you enjoy the interview. Lots of love.
Lovely to see you, my love.
So wonderful to see your face too.
Amazing. I am delighted to have read this book. I read I Love Warrior as well, but I particularly love this, and I really want to drill down with you today about some of the concepts in here, and I want to try and make it as practical as possible, because some of the stuff that you're dealing with is the stuff that I really struggle with. So I want to sort of, for our readers, so as you know, Psychology's readers are very much readers who are used to looking at their inner world, and we know this stuff. But I think knowing it and doing it are two different things.
Yes, they are.
What I see you doing is you doing it, I think. So, I mean, in everything that you're doing, you're putting it into action. So the first question I want what it feels like to me is that you're hooking everything on the knowing piece, and how to know. And I think once you can know, everything else kind of comes from there. That's what it feels like to me. So talk us through the knowing piece, about how to, because I've got all of this stuff and I know all of the things, I've done all the interviews, I get it. But the knowing piece.
Yeah. So those are two different kinds of knowings to me. You know, all of the things that we read and study and learn from example, that's all the stuff we know in our head, right? But the kind of knowing that I'm talking about goes like this. So I somehow wound up being a 42-year-old woman who had no idea what to do next. Just constantly was looking outward for what other people thought I should do, right? So the way this really became crystal clear for me was in my previous marriage. After a decade of marriage, my then husband told me that he had been unfaithful to me throughout our entire marriage, okay? And in the aftershock of that, I found myself completely clueless about what to do. Okay, I did all of the things that I knew to do. I went through the process that I used to go through to know, which is that I constantly looked outside myself. Okay, I asked every single one of my friends what they should do. I looked up every single article on infidelity and the aftermath and blended families. I read and read and read. I took internet quizzes, Suzy, because that's what a really, strong sage-like person does. She takes BuzzFeed quizzes. Okay, in the moment of rock bottom of my cluelessness, I found myself at 3 a.m. sitting on my bed, shoveling ice cream into my mouth and Googling the question, what do I do if my husband is a cheater but is also a really good father? Okay. And I looked at that question and I realized, holy crap, what am I doing? Like, how did I become a 42-year-old woman who is Googling, who is polling a bunch of bots and trolls about what to do with her one wild and precious life, right? Like, when did I stop hearing from myself and checking with myself and knowing myself? Like, when did I start trusting everybody else except for myself? And Suzy, a few weeks later, my son was having a bunch of friends over, and they were all sitting. And I peeked my head in and I said, "Is anybody hungry?" Okay. Every single boy that was in the room, without taking his eyes off the television, yelled out, "Yes." Okay. The girls did something completely different. Okay. When what felt like slow motion, each of the girls took her eyes off the TV and started looking at each other's faces. Okay, Suzy, so each of these girls is looking at her friend's face to find out if she herself is hungry inside her own body. So I'm watching this happen, and then in some kind of wild magical telepathy, the girls somehow silently appoint a spokesperson. Okay, the spokesgirl looks at me and she says, "No, thank you, we're fine." And that's when I realized, oh, I forgot how to know when I learned how to please.
Yeah.
Right? Boys are taught at a very young age that when you need to know what to do, you look inside yourself and you say the thing on the outside that you find on the inside. You look inside yourself. Little girls are taught to look outside of themselves for approval, for consensus, and for permission. Yeah. And that is why we live hungry, right? That is how we become 42-year-olds who are Googling their damn life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all I mean by the knowing is not the mind knowing. That can drive you nuts, because what I realized, when you poll your friends, when you read every article, when you take every quiz, that you will get every single opposing right thing to do. Right? It is literally impossible to please everyone. And that is a beautiful, life-saving, freeing thing to realize, because that's when you figure out that you have to start pleasing yourself.
Yeah.
And so I started practicing this returning to myself thing, which was excruciating in the beginning and just looked like me sitting on the floor in the closet, obsessing over like rearranging my pantry. That's literally all it was for the first several weeks. But what I realized over time is that when I'm brave enough to get still and stop and look inward instead of outward, that there is a kind of what I call the knowing. Some people call it intuition. Some people call it God. Some people call it a gut hunch. It's just, it's a nudge. It's a directional pull. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
One way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you have that. So, I mean, I've done a lot of my readers meditate, and they will know. And now with the lockdown, everyone's feeling maybe for the first time, maybe a connection, you know, starting to slow down enough to connect with something within. Okay, and then you hear the answer. This is what you need to do. Da, 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 da. And then you think, oh dear.
Yeah. Yes.
Really?
Nobody wants to get
no. It's like, no, that can't be right, because, you know, I can't possibly do that because that goes against everything, you know. So whether it is leaving your husband for a woman, or whether it is leaving your husband to go to another country, or whether it's just being brave enough to live your own life, you know, to live it, rather than, I love what you say about the children thing around, you know, putting your kind of sanity first, rather than constantly looking, oh God, I love that. So courage. So you get the knowing, and the next stage to me is courage, bravery. So how do we develop our courage muscles? Do we need to develop them? I mean, what you did was incredibly brave on so many levels. It was brave because, you know, just that you were on a book tour, you know, and oh my goodness, do you know what I mean? Wow. And then you had to sort of change that story. So tell us a little bit about how you find your courage and how we can find our courage.
Yeah, so it's just a big leap from the knowing to the doing, right? And I think one of the reasons why we're all so scared to get still and let the knowing rise is because that usually the knowing points us towards something scary that we have to do that will change. Right? The inner world we have will compel us to do things, say things, make decisions, act certain ways that will disturb the universe, right? Will disturb the universe of our families, of our work life, of all of it. I think the only way to get courage to do those things is, it seems too simple to be true, but I've come to believe that only the simplest things are true, is that you just do it enough times and you realize that you survive it. And not only do you survive it, but you start to learn that what was inside of you is good and true and destined, right? And for women, what is so important is that we are taught very early that honoring ourselves in any way is selfish, right? That honoring our knowing in any way that disturbs the universe will cause pain and suffering for our people. That is ingrained in us. You hear it every time a woman says, I would go back to school, but I can't because of my kids. I would leave my emotionally abusive husband, but I can't because I made my bed and I lie in it. I would, but I can't, right?
Yeah.
So I almost didn't honor myself by building a life with Abby and leaving my broken marriage, because I was taught and believed in my bones that a good mother does not hurt her children, right? I had 3 children who were and are deeply in love with their father, who's a wonderful father. And I thought, how dare I, right? And then one day I was braiding my daughter's hair and I looked at her and I thought, I am staying in this marriage for her, but would I want this marriage for her? And if I would not want this marriage for my little girl, then why am I modeling bad love and calling that good mothering?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what I realized throughout the course of that process was that I don't believe in the hierarchical way of thinking, which is like, do I put my needs first or my kids' needs first? As if it's a line, as if it's a list. That's not the way any of this works. What I need and want and what is true and beautiful for me is always inevitably what is true and beautiful for my people. It might be painful at first, but there is no such thing as one-way liberation. Okay? When I honor my knowing, when I give myself permission to live as my truest self, I automatically grant permission to everybody else in my circle, to all of the people in my family. And that is all we really need. My children don't need a pain-free existence. That's not going to happen. What they need is a model for living bravely, right? What they need is permission to disturb the universe as many times as it takes, to disappoint as many people as it takes, to ensure that they never disappoint themselves.
Yeah.
So what I realized is that old model of motherhood, that a mother is a martyr, that what she does to honor her children is to bury herself, is an utter lie, right? To me, that a good mother is a martyr. I'm sorry, is a model. A good mother is someone who knows that her children will only allow themselves to live as fully as she allows herself to live.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you completely. I think, my thing is always, children don't do what you say, they do what you do. And consciously, I have a 17-year-old son, and I see him in good ways and in bad ways, literally reflecting not the things I've told him, but who I am. So all the ways that I people please and do all of this thing. As a recovering people pleaser, I see him doing the same. So he's a boy, and I it's not just the girls who are doing it, it's the boys too. And that's painful to watch. It is painful to watch. And he does also some great things that I also do. But I've been his model. And yeah, absolutely. So you talk about easiness in the book. And you just kind of mentioned it there again. It says, how do we let go of easy? I mean, that's the thing where, you know, you want it to just, you know, I always had, oh, if it's going easy, I'm doing the right thing. And actually, it's the opposite, isn't it? I mean, at 52, I've decided, it's never easy. It's never easy. But how do we kind of, you know, it's something like the beautiful life never promises to be an easy one, you've said.
Yeah.
How do we let go?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's so hard. It's so hard to break other people's hearts, or seemingly break other people's hearts when you know it's the wrong thing to do, or to go forward. Or how do we let go of that?
I mean, when you talk about, I like what you said about making things practical.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that makes this practical to me is I think that we have been trained over time to believe that there is a price to pay for keeping what I would call disturb the universe. There's a price to pay to cause conflict, to disappoint people, to abandon people's expectations, to do the hard thing and rock the boat. The price to pay of that is too high, right? So we decide not to pay it, and we call that easy.
Yeah.
But the problem is that what we're not calculating in that equation is the inner cost to ourselves of making that constant decision over and over again. There is a price to pay for rocking the boat, and that is outer conflict, right?
Yes.
But there is a price to pay for abandoning ourselves and not rocking the boat, and that is inner conflict, right? The cost of choosing easy over and over again, easy, by keeping the peace, is that we slowly die inside. So in terms of practicality and choice making, it's no longer true to say the price to pay on the outside is too much, so I will not do the thing and get away unscathed. Okay, the calculation for me is, yes, there's a price to pay on the outside, and often it's traumatic, right? But there is a larger price to pay for abandoning myself. And that's the price I'm not going to pay anymore.
I mean, the abandoning yourself piece. I mean, it's so. I mean, we're trained from such an early age to kind of. I mean, I feel like I've abandoned myself the whole of my life. Do you know what I mean? It's constantly people pleasing. In a family, you know, the things I learned as a woman, but also in my particular family setup, was that, you know, if I please, then I am okay. And then it's taken me such a lot of work to get to the point where, you know, I think I'm okay even when I'm not people pleasing, but I still find it's almost like the reaction is so quickly it's there, and I feel like I've got to be enlightened to kind of constantly catch it. Does it get any easier? Do you know what I mean? Or is it difficult? I mean, I feel that pain constantly of, oh God, I really should be going to that, you know, on a very basic, I should be going to that I should be doing this, I should be seeing that person, whatever. But I still find it really, does it get this idea of abandoning ourselves? Sometimes I abandon myself because I haven't got the energy sometimes.
Yes, I hear all of that, and my instinct in this moment would be completely to say, no, it never gets easier. We're in this boat together. I think it actually does get easier.
Okay.
I don't know if you have to go through. I mean, I went through such a dramatic. I left my husband and decided to marry a woman in the middle of a nationwide church tour. Like, I kind of went right into the fire, and I had, you know, entire denominations were writing tear down pieces about me, and it was like the rock bottom of approval. Okay, like everyone hated me for a good while.
Yeah.
And that was the greatest gift of my life because it didn't kill me. I would have sworn to you, Suzy, that kind of disapproval, you know, because disapproval also couched in God language. I mean, to read over and over again that I was going straight to hell, like, you can be a pretty evolved person and that still is heavy, you know? And so surviving all of that, you know, now when somebody says something kind of mean, what I will tell you is that I believe that no matter how public you are, the hardest people to disappoint, right? Like the hardest thing for me was not announcing to the world, Abby. It was telling my parents.
Yeah.
Right? I think the hardest people to disappoint are not people who hate us. That doesn't bother us, right? It's people who love us, you know, and who show their fear and their disapproval in concern, in quiet concern. That's what shakes us, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what we would call with that is boundaries. Like, how do you? I had my hardest coming out was with my mom, who is my best friend in the entire world and who has loved me fiercely and well and deeply since the day I was born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and who was scared to death about my decision to start a life with Abby. She was scared for her grandchildren. She was scared about what the world was going to say. She thought I had lost my mind. She was scared about all of it. And I could hear her fear in every conversation. I could hear, you know, she was worrying and calling that love. You know, those, they just like got the memo.
You talk beautifully about this in the book, about how you manage that. So talk us a little bit, because again, in a very practical way, how do you talked about boundaries. How do you manage that in the, you know, in the moment, you know, that you don't want to fall out with the people that you love the most. And there's sort of, maybe it sounds like your mum, it was very still soft and concerned. I mean, some people will just say, I'll never speak to you again. You know, that I hate you because of what you're, you know, and they will reject you.
And that makes things clear. That makes things easier for me. I mean, I know there's another hardness that goes with that. And I've experienced that too.
Yeah.
Okay. But at least that's crystal clear.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's mushier. It's harder to find your ground when it's love, right? When it's really, it's fear, but it's mixed up in love. It's from somebody who really does want the best for you. It's not black and white. So, I mean, I can tell you very practically what I did. I can tell you minute by minute what I did.
Yeah.
So what I found, Suzy, was that I was on the phone with my mom often, and I would find myself listening to her fear and getting defensive. Okay. The minute I feel myself getting defensive or explaining myself or justifying myself, that is a practical red flag that I'm beginning to abandon myself.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
Because, right? Because when a 42-year-old woman is explaining herself, red flag, because a 42-year-old woman is a grown-ass woman who doesn't have to explain or justify herself to anyone, right?
Yeah.
So when you are doing that, you know you're slipping. During that particular conversation, I heard my mom say, your dad and I are going to come visit you next week, and the kids. And I said, no, you can't come. I said, you can't come because you're still afraid, and my children are not afraid. They don't carry the fear you're carrying, right? Because we raised them to know that love is love, and that it's best to just be yourself and let the world catch up, right? But if you come here, they will see the fear in your eyes, and they will help you carry it because they love and trust you. So I have to tell you this very hard thing, which is that your fear is not our problem, right? But it is a problem. It's your problem, and you have to go figure it out. I can't be the one to fix this for you.
Wow. Yeah.
You figure it out, and when you are ready to come to our island, this is what we called it at the time, our family's island. When you are ready to come to our family's island with nothing but love and acceptance and celebration, we will lower the drawbridge for you, but not 1 second sooner. And Suzy, out of the entire journey of that time, dealing with the public, dealing with TV, dealing with the churches, that was the most important moment of the entire journey.
Yeah.
That was the moment where my mother and where a mother and a daughter became two women. Right?
Yeah.
And I think in terms of this like duality that we think of with our parents, like I can either honor myself or I can honor my parents. I don't believe in that either. I believe that we most deeply honor our parents when we trust fully the people they raised.
Yeah.
Even when honoring and goes in opposition with what they believe.
Yeah. Yes. And did your mom seek help? Did she get therapy? Did she get counseling and help her? How did she process that?
Well, sometimes I almost feel sad telling the next part of the story, which is why I didn't tell it in the book, because it's such a miracle. And I know so many people don't get it. And I didn't want to suggest that it is inevitable that this happens when you lay out boundaries, because it often doesn't. But there is something about my mother who, okay, what I believe is that sometimes people's fear for us is just that they deeply want us to be okay.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not in my case, it wasn't homophobia, it wasn't bigotry, it was terror that the world would not be gentle with her baby and her grandchildren.
Yeah.
Right? And I think what she watched over time is that I was more okay than I had ever been in my life. Right? She watched her daughter come back to life.
Yeah.
Right? She said when Abby went over to my parents to tell them that she was going to propose, my mother burst into tears, and the first thing she said was, I have not seen my daughter this alive since she was 10 years old. Yeah. Right? And 10 is when I became bulimic and fell into addiction and was lost forever for a decade and a half. So I think the truth of the matter is that she just desperately wanted me to be okay. And what she watched was her daughter be okay.
Yeah.
And that is when she realized, oh, what I should be afraid of is that my daughter does abandon herself, not that she doesn't.
Yeah.
And
the consequences of you abandoning yourself was 15 years of hardcore addiction. And she was like, okay, we're not going there again. And then as she saw you come back to life, this blossoming that happened, she's like, oh.
And see, this wild thing happened with her, which is that you wouldn't believe, if I sent you pictures of her, okay, we are a family of activists, and the fiercest activist in our family is my mom. She has now been to more LGBTQ freaking events, pride parades than Abby and I have put together.
Yeah.
She plans trans remembrance ceremonies at her church. She goes to marches. She goes to something about that time awakened her in a big way. And what I think she decided, Suzy, is okay, I am not going to try to change my daughter because I'm afraid of the world. I'm going to just go ahead and change the world to make it safer for my daughter.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Right? That's where she puts her energy now.
Yeah. Amazing. I know we've only got a few minutes left. So last question, which is about imagination. You talk a lot about imagination, and I love this idea. We use it a lot in psychologies, the idea of using our imagination in this process of surrendering, letting go, stop trying to control, knowing, and then trying to imagine. How do we, to create the new era of our lives, how do we imagine that into the world?
Oh God, this is my favorite thing. I always feel like, how do I talk about this without sounding Pollyanna or woo woo or whatever? Okay. Let me just tell you practically how this works for me.
Yeah.
So every time a woman that I'm talking to, I feel like my job is really just to listen deeply to women. That's what I've been doing for a decade, right? Just listen. And I've noticed this pattern that women often have a deep longing inside of themselves, like an ache, a longing. It's like this knowing that things were supposed to be a little more beautiful than they are, like their relationship, right? Like this, and then the whole world gaslights women and is like, no, you're crazy. It's fine. Everything's fine, right? But they still have this like, this longing. And so what will happen is somebody will say, and by the way, a lot of women have a longing for a more beautiful relationship with the same person. Okay. Not everybody needs to leave their husband and marry an Olympian that's a female. Okay. I mean, I highly recommend it, Suzy, but a lot of my friends just want something more beautiful with their husband, with their person, right? So what they will say to me, just without fail, when they're brave enough to admit the longing, they will say, I want this, but I can't do it because of this. I shouldn't do it because of this. I'm not supposed to do it because of this. This, okay. Can'ts, shoulds, right, wrong, good, bad, all of this mind language, okay? By the way, none of that stuff is real. Good, bad, right, wrong, all of those are man-made, culturally constructed concepts, right? None of them are pure. So whenever a friend of mine starts talking like that, I've become obsessed with, okay, how do I get her out of her indoctrinated brain, right, into her vision, into her imagination, into the truest part of her. And I think you can do it with language, Suzy, because this is what I've started practicing. When I start getting the lists of can't and should and shouldn't, I say, okay, so let's say my friend's talking about her marriage. I would talk to him about this, but I can't because blah, blah, blah. I'll say, okay, stop. Can you tell me a story about the truest, most beautiful marriage you can imagine? And then something, Suzy, I can see it happen every freaking time, whether it's about their job. Okay, stop. Can you tell me the truest, most beautiful story you can about the most beautiful career you can imagine? The most beautiful community, the most beautiful nation, the most beautiful life, the most beautiful relationship between a mother and a son. And then it's like the mind shuts down and this beautiful, free storyteller emerges. You know, and I have just, because I've seen it happen so many times, I have truly begun to believe that there is something inside of us that I call imagination that is like a blueprint for what the hell we're supposed to do, right? It's like we think the imagination is like for pipe dreams and blah, 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 and actions, like our marching orders are in there, because what I find is that the true and beautiful story that every woman tells me is different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's so different. It's the proof that there's no cookie cutter.
Yeah.
There's no perfect ideal marriage or career. It's all so unique and so individual, and it is inside of us. It's just not up here in our heads.
But I think that's going back to our first question and what we were looking at, that about the knowing. I think the journey, it feels like, is when you drop down and get to that place in your body rather than your head, you start to create a new story for yourself and a new vision of what the imagination. And I think sometimes, again, in my own experience, and I think with our readers, we find it difficult to kind of, you know, when we're trying to create what it looks like out here, it doesn't work. But as soon as you drop down and go, actually, this is what I really, I mean, I'm currently living on a canal boat. This is where my yeah. So it's like, you know, it's that thing of, I can't move to a canal boat. No, I can't. Absolutely. I don't know anything about canal boats. Within 6 weeks, I had left my home and moved onto a canal boat with my teenage son. And we're living in central London now. I mean, amazing. But that was truly what you've just talked about. That was not all the stuff. It was something completely different. So I think you're absolutely correct in that when you start to imagine a different type of, like, it doesn't look how all of this old stuff of outside this is how your life should look. It looks really different. It really does.
I'm so happy for you, Suzy. And then once you start doing it and you see that it actually can happen, and that not only does it in the long run hurt your people, but it inspires them.
Yeah.
You get to the point in your life where you think, I can't not live on a canal boat.
Yeah.
Of course I have to.
And it's so true. I mean, it's so true. It's like when you start to align with the knowing, and sometimes the knowing just feels slightly insane.
Yeah.
Just okay, I'm just going to go with the knowing here. And you know, and this is what your book is about, and this is why I love it, because it's very it's a kind of a rallying call for all of us women who hear that call, we hear that invitation, and we go, oh, that's a little bit insane. Like, yeah, it is, but come on, do it anyway. I love it. So all I can do is thank you for writing this book for us all. I've been literally texting my friends going, you've got to read this book, you've got to read this book, because I just think it's a book that modern women should all read. So congratulations on such a brilliant achievement to do this. It's fantastic, and congratulations on your new love and your new life. And you know, you've gone for love and you created it, and I love this story. But it's also a love for yourself, which is what I took out of it, is that you haven't abandoned yourself. You're, you know, that the greatest love of all, to quote Whitney, is, you know, it is yourself, and that's what you've kind of modeled so beautifully in the book. So thank you.
Seriously, I'm going to spend my whole day thinking about you on your canal boat. I love it.
Okay. Thank you so much, Glennon, for your time today. Absolutely wonderful to speak to you. And we'll be putting you in the magazine and shouting about the book as much as we possibly can. Lots of love.
Thank you. Lots of love to you, Suzy.